of human lives. I therefore implore all Nigerians and corporate citizens to take responsibility and play the expected role expected of each and every one of us. I will now invite the Honorable Minister of Health to provide you with further details. The DG Center for Disease Control would elaborate on the technical aspects of the next steps, while the National Coordinator would expatiate on the guidelines before it is published. Thereafter, Honorable Ministers will give you updates on the responsibilities of their various MDAs. I want to thank you for listening.
The SGF was not informed. I'm sorry, we have to apologize. We need to give priority and exclusivity to the chairman's address, and only the national coordinator will elaborate on what he has said, because this is like the second phase of the lockdown protocol, and we will not want that to be diluted by any other usual ordinary matter. We apologize, please. Thank you.
Thank you, the Chairman, PTF, Honorable Ministers and members of the Presidential Task Force, gentlemen of the press, good evening. So as stated earlier by the Chairman, the goal of Phase 2 over the next 4 weeks is to balance public safety with protecting livelihoods, as well as allowing the full restoration of economic activities across the country. Effective from tomorrow, Tuesday, the 2nd of June 2020, the easing of the lockdown will be characterized by the following. 1. The nationwide curfew will remain in place, but the timing of this will be reduced to 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And just to clarify, the purpose of the curfew is to limit social interactions and therefore reduce the risk of transmission of the virus. Persons that are on essential duty, including but not limited to those involved in the provision of healthcare services, media services, and critical infrastructure, are exempted from the curfew. 2. All interstate travel by individuals remains prohibited except for essential travel and the movement of goods and services. Just to make it clear, all restrictions on the free movement of goods and services is now removed in this phase. 3. There will be full opening of the financial sector, with banks now allowed to operate normal working hours 5 days a week. 4. The mass gathering of more than 20 people outside of a workplace or places of worship remains prohibited. 5. There will be controlled access to markets and locations of economic activities, but local authorities will continue to provide guidance on opening times. 6. Restricted opening of places of worship will be based on state government protocols and with strict guidelines on physical distancing and other non-pharmaceutical interventions. And just to clarify, this will apply to regular church and mosque services only. 7. Mandatory supervised isolation of persons arriving outside the country will continue to be for 14 days until a new policy comes into place. But just to clarify again, there will be no further evacuation of Nigerians until the new policy that is currently being developed with the private sector comes into place. So any prior arrangements for evacuation of Nigerians from outside the country is suspended until the new policy comes into place. I will now go through the specific protocols for containment of COVID-19. And just to emphasize that all these measures would need to include compliance on the non-pharmaceutical interventions, things such as the provision of hand-washing facilities, the mandatory wearing of masks, the maintenance of physical distancing, the avoidance of mass gatherings. In terms of general movement, persons may go out for work, go to buy necessary foods, and for exercise, provided they abide by the curfew hours. Movement between local government areas is strongly discouraged unless for critical reasons such as healthcare and work. I would like to emphasize that it is still safer to stay at home and avoid crowds. The pandemic is not over in this country, and the relaxation of some of the rules does not mean that it is safer to go out. If you do not need to go out, please continue to stay at home. Hawking and street trading is also prohibited, and we will be looking into this in greater detail with state authorities. For the aviation sector, the aviation industry is requested to start developing protocols to allow for domestic flights to resume anytime from the 21st of June onwards. Airlines must ensure physical distancing by reducing passenger capacity, ensure the provision of sanitizers and appropriate personal protective equipment, as well as carrying out temperature checks at point of entry and departure, and ensuring that airports are not congested by either travelers or airport staff. With interstate travel, movement across state borders remains restricted other than the free movement of goods and essential travel. Security services are requested to please cooperate with members of the public and ensure that goods are provided with free passage, as this particular phase is directed at ensuring the economy starts moving again. With intra-state travel, we will implement new travel processes for areas of the country with high burden local government areas, and this will be restricted to essential travel. But for the moment, with intrastate travel, all the prior guidelines will remain, including reduced occupancy for buses and taxis, the need for temperature checks where available, the provision of hand-washing facilities, and the maintenance of physical distancing. For the industry and labor sectors, in terms of working hours, normal working hours would apply to offices other than government offices, provided this is kept within the curfew hours of 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. Offices are to maintain working at 75% capacity while maintaining the 2-meter physical distancing. For government offices, they can open between the hours of 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., so no change in opening hours, but can work from Mondays to Fridays. Prior to this, we allowed a 3-day working week. However, only persons that are within the grade levels of 14 and above at both the federal and the state government level will be allowed to come into work. We will encourage staff to continue to work at home if possible, including within the business and the private sector, making the best use of technology that is now available. For personalized services such as mechanics, artisans, hair salons that own their own workshop or workstations, provided they clearly adhere to non-pharmaceutical interventions, they are allowed to operate from now on, but must ensure the wearing of a face mask when selling goods or providing services, must ensure provision of sanitizers and appropriate PPEs to their workers. They must limit the number of workers and customers within their premises, and state and local government authorities are requested to please ensure and monitor compliance. Supermarkets, there's no major change for supermarkets, neither is there any major change in markets, apart from the fact that local authorities will continue to define the day and time for opening of shops. Hotels may reopen, but must observe all mandatory non-pharmaceutical interventions. Restaurants other than those in hotels must remain closed for eat-ins, but are allowed to prioritize and continue practicing the take-away system. Bars, gyms, cinemas, and nightclubs are closed until further evaluation. We will continue to support the agricultural sector to ensure food security for our citizens, and in this regard, farmers are requested to please go ahead with their normal activities provided they observe all mandatory non-pharmaceutical interventions. Schools. All schools to remain closed until further evaluation. The Federal Ministry of Education is instructed to work with schools to start the process of preparing students that require exiting exams, i.e. certifying students, to allow them to take exams in the next phase, early in the next phase of the lifting of the lockdown. But for the moment, schools are to remain closed. I have already mentioned places of worship. Restricted opening will apply subject to the guidelines issued by the PTF as well as the protocols agreed by respective state governments working with religious leaders. We expect all mandatory non-pharmaceutical interventions to apply. Recreational parks and communal sports will remain closed until further evaluation. And for funerals, we are still limiting this to 20 people, including close family, with physical distancing to be adhered to, as well as hand washing. Finally, state governments and security agencies are enjoined to ensure effective and strict enforcement of these guidelines while respecting the exemptions that have been approved by Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have been presented this afternoon with details of the next steps. We will now